Hi, Phil here from Now Spinning magazine. Today is Ozzy Osbourne's funeral. Well, it's the procession through Birmingham. I didn't watch it live. I wasn't able to see that, and I think, to be honest, it would have been too raw a thing to try and watch. But I've caught up with a lot of the highlights, and I've seen lots of personal footage across my social media feeds, and it's brought forward a whole mix of emotions, really. It only seems just over a week ago that I did a tribute video, and I also spoke about Ozzy after that, and I haven't really done many other videos on the Now Spinning magazine channel because of how big this news is to me personally, and to many of you who watch this. But what's become apparent to me is I had no idea, and I don't think many of us did, the sheer enormity of the sense of feeling and grief and outpouring of feelings that we've seen around the world. I might have seen one or two people say, has anyone had enough of Ozzy yet and moving on to other things? Or, but by and large, my news feeds have remained static. It's just been all about Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, and that's a lot of what I've been playing. I've been doing other things because of the nature of what I do, but a lot of it's been kind of put back or held back because I just haven't been in the right kind of headspace, really. I think one of the things about watching the footage from the procession through Birmingham was that nearly 9 million people watched the live stream. Nearly 9 million. And looking through at the streets of Birmingham, it was like 8, 10 deep on the pavements, each side of the road. With everyone taking pictures, shouting at Ozzy, people hanging out of windows, as far as the eye could see. Absolutely incredible. And I mentioned, I think, in my tribute, when I was going back to, I think it was the mid-70s sometimes, when I just started going into Birmingham to go to the pubs, and I bumped into Ozzy, I think it was about 3 times. And I remember one time particularly, I was walking down I think I was going towards the sack of potatoes towards Aston University, and that part of the Birmingham then was quite dark, and to get out to the centre of Birmingham, I'd been to the Pennywig pub, I think, and I was coming around to going down towards Aston University, and Ozzy Osbourne was coming up the other way, and I bumped into him there before, and I knew it was him, and I just, being a bit cheeky, being an teenager, I said, "All right, John." I didn't call him Ozzy, and he said, "All right, mate." And I think that one of the things that it was just, if you looked in either direction, where I was coming from or he was coming from, I think we were the only humans on that road then. But I think what it made me think, seeing this on the TV, is that this would never have happened. It'd be like saying, Ozzy, one day the whole of this city will come to a complete standstill because of what you personally achieve. Or even thinking of when I was carrying, a Black Sabbath album under my arm, going from one classroom to another when I was at school, trying to look like a cool kid. It never quite worked. Think that one day the whole city will come to a standstill and know exactly who this band is that you're carrying this album under your arm from one classroom to another. Wouldn't have crossed my mind. Or going to see Sabbath at Birmingham Odeon, which held about, how many was it? About 3,000 people, and that was sold out, and thinking that, wow, that many people have gone to see Black Sabbath tonight in Birmingham. And thinking one day, literally, there'll be millions of people lining the streets because they know who Black Sabbath are. Wouldn't have crossed my mind, and wouldn't have crossed many of your minds either. Those of you around there as well. I mean, there were some parts of today that was a bit kind of irksome, where the various main media channels pull in a music journalist and try and get some intelligent backstory and data from them about why is this happening, why are people so interested in Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, and how did it all start. And you kind of hear them get how Black Sabbath got their name wrong again, and how they did this, and you go, oh dear, why don't they just reach out to the people, not me, but people, doing similar things to me, actually know some of this stuff quite well. I would have to say, actually, the young girl who worked for the Birmingham Evening Mail, they should have just spoken to her. Her passion for Birmingham and Ozzy and how everyone feels was probably the person to tap into. She really knew her subject and really felt it and really understood what everybody lining those streets was feeling and going through. And I think that's one of the main things, really. The other thing is that's really come home to me today, and I thought about this when I did an update last week, saying this is like Ozzy Osbourne, that the reaction we're getting here on a global scale, it's like Elvis or David Bowie or Freddie Mercury, or it's actually bigger than that. I think it's bigger than that. There was nothing like this. It's more like in the UK, like Princess Di or the Queen. And I think it's because everyone kind of felt like they knew Ozzy. There was no kind of airs or graces about him. And I read in one of it could have been the Times or the Telegraph, some journalists had been sent off to interview him about 10 years ago, and they weren't into heavy metal. And I think they went begrudgingly off to interview Ozzy, and they'd been with him 10 minutes and they just realised they loved him. And I think there's something about him as a person. And I think she asked him a question like, because she was she might have been trying to trip him up about, he's all about heavy metal. What do you think about classical music or something? And he said, I don't know anything about music. All I know is if the hairs on the back of my arm go up, then it must be good. Which is true, isn't it? That's all you need to know about music. Does it do something for you personally? And for millions of people, the music of Black Sabbath and Ozzy's albums certainly do that. The other thing I've seen springing up all over the place on social media is people now saying, "Oh, who do you know Ozzy more than Crazy Train?" Or if you just, how many albums have you got to count yourself as, true Ozzy fan? Of people just wearing Black Sabbath t-shirts because it's like all of a sudden become like something cool to do. I don't think it really matters. I think anyone's entry point to an artist can happen at any time, and I would imagine that a lot of people have been caught up in this swell of emotion and grief for Ozzy Osbourne, and they might have come along and suddenly started listening to Black Sabbath for the first time, or an Ozzy Osbourne album, and suddenly thought, wow, I had no idea. Welcome aboard. I don't think that's a problem. Everyone has to have an entry point. And everyone watching this channel, there'll be some of you who are probably in your early teens, there will be some of you in your late 70s. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. The other thing someone said to me when I did my tribute, they said, well, just be lucky, Phil, it wasn't anyone from your family. Then you'd know what grief is. I think what they meant was, I don't think they meant anything mean necessarily. I think they were thinking that, this outpouring of grief for someone that many of us, most people, have never met. So how can you feel grief for someone you don't know? Well, you kind of do know them, don't you? Because they've been part of, for many of us, they've been part of our lives. For many of you, you've had Black Sabbath playing when you met somebody, when you when you lost somebody, when you had a christening, or when you had special occasions. There'll be time. It's like music is like the soundtrack of your life, and certain songs become like diary entries that you can go back to. They form the soundtrack. I mean, when we watch a drama on the TV or a film, it has music in it because it enhances and really focuses and pushes forward the emotion, what we feel at a certain point. And in our lives, we have the same thing. And for many of us, Black Sabbath has been part of that. And I said in my tribute that Black Sabbath music, for me, was a talisman, a shield against some of the darker times when I was doing my first jobs after leaving school. It was Black Sabbath kind of gave me that extra confidence to do myself. And many people, many young musicians, and lots of, I can see on the TV, lots of young brummies are saying the same thing, that it's given them, Ozzy's approach to life meant that anything could happen. Believe in your dreams and anything could happen. But he didn't change from just being himself. And I think that's the other thing I think you get from Ozzy as well, really. But it is all about the music to many of us. The other thing I want to say is that there's quite a few people, which is fine, doing this kind of symbol, like what is called the heavy metal horns thing, isn't it? Ozzy. But Ozzy didn't do that. Ozzy did the peace sign. The reason where that came from was Ronnie James Dio, and it's when he joined Black Sabbath, and he couldn't do that because this was such a huge thing that Ozzy did. Having the two hands outstretched with doing the peace sign. It was such an iconic image for Black Sabbath that when Ronnie James Dio joined, he did that as an alternative. And then it's taken on a whole new story all on its own, but I was there. That's what happened. But the reason why I want to point that out is that, and I have "Music is the Healer and the Doctor" across my T-shirt, is I do believe that music is the healer and the doctor, and I don't just mean that it kind of magically fixes things that are wrong with us on and the healing, because it could be all sorts of things, whether it's physical or mental thing. Music does affect us on a molecular level, but it isn't. That's not what I meant. The other thing that I think when I saw those images at Birmingham was all sorts of people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, all together with a united feeling. And that's the other thing that music does to heal, and that's what Ozzy's doing there when he's doing the peace symbol. Is peace. And I think that one of the things that we've probably seen come out of this, and if you look outside of this story on the news, it's pretty bleak, isn't it, really, what's going on in the world? And I think that music brings us together and helps. Without Ozzy's peace symbol, is we've got people from all sorts of backgrounds. Some people who probably come from being an Aston Villa fan and hearing that Ozzy crazy train every Saturday or every match, and then others came from factories in the early 70s listening to Black Sabbath together through the day. Parts of us have gone to heavy metal clubs and feel part of a community and part of something as someone else. It's because of a specific song, but all of us have been brought together in a peaceful way to celebrate one person. But it's not just one person in a way, it's 25% of a whole, which is Black Sabbath. I would also suggest that if you are someone who's coming in from the outside, on the outside orbit, and now just wanting to know where to go, listen to all the Black Sabbath albums. Listen to all the Ozzy albums. The Ozzy albums there's lots of melody, there's lots of light and shade in the Sabbath ones. If you think you worked out what you think heavy metal is, you're probably wrong, because Black Sabbath have always been told, oh, they created a genre, whatever. But when you listen to it, there's a lot of other stuff going on in amongst all of that. and especially Ozzy albums. There's so much to enjoy. I think the other thing that was incredibly moving, and I personally think this was the right thing, was seeing the family get out of the car at the Sabbath Bridge, and that was really, I bet for everyone watching that, I bet that was probably the hardest thing to watch, because Ozzy existed for Sharon and Sharon existed for Ozzy, and Sharon looks very vulnerable, and I hope everyone is staying with her. She looked very frail, and that was very hard to watch, and lots of people shouting her name out, and that was the hardest part, I thought, to see. I mean, because of the image that she's always put across, she was just destroyed, wasn't she, with grief. And I'll end with this, because I've mentioned, didn't I, about I didn't really go into much depth about it, about how you can feel grief for someone you don't know, but these are kind of, it's a real thing. And I think Ozzy wanted this to be a celebration, and it certainly was, and it certainly will be. And I think there's got to be, no doubt, the record companies watching this will be thinking, do you know what? I know somebody said to us the other week, there was no way we could possibly repackage the Black Sabbath albums. I'll be surprised, but it's okay, because there's lots of new people coming on there who want to come onto this and join this. Let's remember also that Ozzy raised £140 million for local charities, which is incredible legacy for him to have beyond the music. But I think the key thing is Ozzy was a one-off, a really great character. The music will live on. I think I said before, the stories may fade, but the music won't. And neither will. And those of you however you feel on this, and if it still feels very raw, I know someone in the Now Spinning group said they couldn't watch any of the funeral stuff. It's just too much. I understand that as well. So all of you, take care, keep spinning those discs, and remember, with anything like this, you'll have some days where you feel like you can just plough ahead, other days when you feel you can just keep smiling, and other days when you just crash and bump and bounce along the bottom for a bit. It's all okay. Just remember to be gentle with yourselves, look after yourselves, hug your loved ones, and remember that, as I said, music is the healer and the doctor. Keep spinning those discs, and I'll talk to you all very, very soon.